We have the great honor of having Rabbi Chaim Kramer join us here from Yerushalayim HaKodesh, or Hashem. You still owe us a Shabbos over here. That's Hashem, we hope to cash in. But for now, you'll get us into the Purim mode. Rabbi Chaim.
Ready? Lesson 56 in the Likutey Moaharn. Right. Yom HaBikurim. It's really Aleichem Shalom. I remember you. You're one of the guys who remembers from years ago. Right? Yom HaBikurim. Shavuos, and you bring a new korban, whatever the case is. This Torah was said on Shavuos, but it has a lot to do with Purim. What we're going to do is learn some of the highlights from the beginning of the lesson so we can get to the Purim concept. Yesh b'chol echad b'Yisrael b'chinas malchus. Every Jew has a concept of malchus in him. Everyone according to his level. Yesh b'chinas malchus. Yeshu soida b'veisoi. There are some who rule in their home. There are some who don't. Yeshu moshe b'yoseh. There are those who rule. Let's say they're a boss. They have a company with a few people. Yeshu moshe l'kol ha'olam. There's one person who rules over the entire world. Everyone according to the malchus that they has, there are those who rule over thousands, there are those who rule over hundreds, those who rule over 50 people, and those who rule over 10 people. Right? This person rules over all. There is something that's called iskasya, which means it's hidden. It's concealed. What does it mean? His rule is really something that's not seen by anybody, right? There are people that have rulership even if it's hidden. And we'll come to explain all this in a few minutes. Even if you see, you look, that he doesn't have any ruling power over them. All right, the people, he rules over them because in the ladder of the neshamos, his neshama is higher, and therefore he has ruling power over them. Okay?
Even in a temporal sense?
Huh?
Even in a temporal sense, a king.
In
a temporal sense, a king, president.
Sometimes,
king,
okay.
Czar, whatever.
We're here with the Rebbe is really talking about the Jewish nation. Mm-hmm. Right, but really it applies to everybody. There are some kings, Nebuchadnezzar, for example, was given rulership over the entire world. Right? Achov Melech Yisrael, he was an Oved Avodah Zarah, one of the top Oved Avodah Zarah that you could find in history. He ruled over the entire world.
But didn't we just say it had?
Let's go over this.
But a Hechon the Shama, no?
Huh?
You talk about a Hechon the Shama.
Okay, so now we're going to talk about what this all means. Every Jew has a concept of malchus, of rulership. You rule, you have power over others. That's what it's all about, power over others, right? From where does that power come? It's called malchus. Malchus is the Shekhinah. Malchus is where every Jewish neshama comes from. According to the Ari, there are some neshamas that are higher, but those are very few and far between. But according to the Ari, every neshama comes from what's called the term Ze'er Ampin, with the diminished countenance, and Malchus, the Shechina, right? This is Kabbalistic terms, which doesn't really apply to us too much in the concept of the lesson. The idea is that Malchus is the Shechina, and every Jew is a Chelek Elika Miba'al. Every Jew is a portion of Hashem from above. He's a portion of the Shechina HaKadosh. Right? Remember, every Jew, he's from, or if he's not, right? Every Jew comes through the agency of Malchus. Let's call it an agency. And everyone, according to how he is rooted in Malchus, that's how he has his power of Malchus, right? So there are some that rule in their home. There are some, as we said, don't. The wife takes over, whatever. But she's more of a Malchus than that, but whatever. We're not going to go into that now. Point is that the Arizal explains in Shara Gugulim that all the neshamas are basically like a tree. There's a hierarchy, right? There's a root. The root soul is Moshe Rabbeinu. The root soul is Odom Arisha, right? And it goes up, it grows up, and there are branches that extend from this tree. Right? For example, you have Rabbi Akiva. The Gemara says Rabbi Akiva had 5 Talmidim, some say 6. He had Rabbi Yehuda, Rabbi Yossi, Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai, he had Rabbi Menachem. This is Rabbi Akiva. But he's a branch of the tree. From that branch grew out other branches, smaller branches, which was Rabbi Meir, Rabbi Yehuda, and so on. But there's a tree. And every person, as they go up the tree, wherever the neshama is rooted, they belong to a certain area of the Shechina, Kaviyocho. They belong in that area. And wherever they are, if they're a branch, well, there are small branches that come out from there. And there are twigs that come out from the branch. And there are leaves that come out from the branch. The Arizal explains that the Talmud Chochem is the main branch, right? And the Balabatim that support him are the other branches that are along that main branch. So they all belong. That's why these people gravitate to this Rebbe, these people gravitate to this Rosh Hashiva, these people gravitate to this kind of tzedakah, these people gravitate to this kind of Yiddishkeit, and so on, because they're all branches coming out from the tree of the neshamas, which is Malchus. Okay? So now, the Rebbe is explaining here, and we'll go into it in the second paragraph too. The Rebbe is explaining that every person has a concept of Malchus. Why? Because you're part of Malchus. Every person has a concept of Malchus in them. And the Gemara says, Kol Yisrael b'nei Menachem heim. They're b'nei Menachem. Why are they b'nei Menachem? Because they really have this Malchus, this ruling power in them. The ruling power, sometimes it's external, sometimes it's revealed, sometimes we can see it. Person is a boss of a factory, has 50 workers, 100 workers, whatever. I mean, they're all part of his branch. They all come from him. He is supplying them. And then there are others who are biaskasya, those who are hidden, that you don't see them, because they're closer to the main trunk of the tree, right? And that's where their roots are, so that they really control that branch. They really control those branches, those twigs, whatever it may be. They're in control of that. There is one tzaddik, the Rebbe says, that who rules over the entire world. Nobody sees it, nobody knows it, right? That's because we mentioned earlier the terms. We're not going to go into it. There's no need to. But the terms of Ze'er Ampin and Malchus Ze'er Anpin has what's called 6 spheros, for those who are familiar with the terms, right? And of the 6, Chesed, Gvura, Tiferes, Netzach, Hod, and there's Yesod. Yesod is the branch of Ze'er Anpin that unifies with Malchus. Yesod is the tzaddik Yesod Olam. He's the tzaddik where the entire world actually is fed through this tzaddik. It's a Gemara. The Gemara says, Kol Olam Nizoin Bishvil Chanina B'ni. The whole world is fed in the schus of Reb Chanina ben Doisa. It's a Gemara. Reb Chanina ben Doisa didn't have bread to eat during the week, but the whole world ate because of him, because of his koyach, because he was called Tzaddik Yesod Olam. So that everybody has a concept of Malchus in them. In Siv Beis, the Rebbe says you have to be careful to use your Malchus not for your honor, not for yourself. The trick of ruling, the trick of being in charge is it's not for yourself. It's not that I have a position, right? A person has to learn to be mavatal himself. A person has to learn to be humble and work with humility so that he doesn't become haughty or arrogant and rule, wrongly over others, right? He has to learn how to use everything for the sake of Shemayim. That's the kroshkeit of a tzaddik. Rish Moshe Onov Miyoid. Moshe Rabbeinu was very modest. Moshe Rabbeinu was very humble. But he ruled over the entire world, right? Who brought the 10 Makos on Mitzrayim? Who split the sea? Right? Of course it was Hashem's koyach. Everything is Hashem's koyach. But it was Moshe Rabbeinu. He's the one who had to do it. He had the koyach really to rule over the entire world. Because the tzaddik is Yesod, and everything in this world comes from that koyach of Malchus. So the Rebbe says, according to how much you have towards the end of Siv Beis, Kol echad v'echad lefi bechinas hamalchus sheyesh lo b'izgayu v'skasya, everyone according to how he is rooted in the power of Malchus, that's how he has to rule over the people in order to, whatever the Rebbe will teach us in Sif Gimel, but in order to use your koyach, your power of ruling, right, you have to use it right. You have to use it l'shem shemayim. Don't ever chas v'sholem try and take power for yourself. Right? You can see someone asked me just now, what about the goyim and whatnot? Goyim also have power, right? Pasuk in Mishlei, it's known. Leiv molochem v'sarim biyad Hashem, right? The hearts of kings and rulers, right? Who told Putin to go into Ukraine today, right? Who told him, right? It's in the heart of Hashem, right? Hashem put it into his heart to do something like that, right? Who do you have? This guy, Biden, whatever he says, whatever he does, we're going to put sanctions, right? The Goyim have power too. Hachana litzlan, 70 years ago, you had Hitler, he had power, right? But the power was, of course, used wrong. Paroi and Mitzrayim used his power wrong, right? All the years, throughout all the generations, you have all the people using the power for their own benefit, right? Where do you have people who use power for their own, for the sake of Hashem? And that's what Rebbe says in Sif Gimel. It's a very long Sif, but the Rebbe says in order to keep your Malchus, you have to draw what's called Arichas Yomim, right? The Pasuk says in Pasha Shoftim, L'man Yarich Yomim al Mamlachtoi hu uvanav b'kerev Yisrael. For a thank you for raising the heat. Right? Person should have a long kingdom, right? Hashem says in the Torah, if the king will serve Hashem, will follow through with Hashem, so at that time, right, he will have arichas yomim. What's arichas yomim? Rabbi explains here it's the Torah HaKadosha. The Torah is called the arichas yomim. The Rabbi explains in this whole paragraph. It's a very long paragraph, but he explains that the Torah is arichas yomim. Ki hu chayecha v'orech yomecha. It's your life and the extended life of yourself. Orech yomecha. So Torah is the arichas yomim. Right? If you have arichas yomim, you have to bring it into the malchus. So really, the Rebbe is now going to say in this whole long paragraph, which we're not going to go through, but we'll just highlight it. The Rebbe is saying that a person with his malchus has to get his power of malchus from the Torah HaKadosha. He has to learn from the Torah what power is. The Torah is Bi Melochem Yimloichu. It's a pasuk in Mishlei. With me, kings will rule, right? That the Torah has to spread out into the world. That's the power of the Torah HaKadosha. It has to spread into the world. If you are going to study Torah, if you are going to learn Torah and to speak Torah and to teach Torah, then you are ruling over all those people who are under you. Someone asked me once, the Rebbe spoke very much about the importance of being Makarev Nefashos. Go out, outreach, right? The Rebbe spoke about outreach 200 years ago. It's not something new the last 50 years or so. Outreach. How do you do it? What if a person doesn't really know? What if a person knows, but he doesn't know how to teach? There are plenty of teachers out there that haven't the faintest idea how to convey a concept, how to teach. You may know it, you may be able to give it over, but have you taught the person to really integrate what you have taught into their lives, into their minds, into their feelings? Teaching is a profession unto itself. So, how do you makarev and foshes? The Rebbe explains in lesson 14, there are 600,000 letters in the Torah. Gemara, Medrash, Zoya speaks about it. Zoya and Shiur. There are 600,000 letters in the Torah. 600,000 letters. If you count them up, there's 304,000 or something like that. Where the 600,000? The Pnei Yeshua has. There's a few Meforshim that explain that it's in the hidden, the unpronounced letters, like Lemor with an aleph. There are some letters that an aleph should be there and it's not, and whatnot, some words. So Bekitza, it fills in. The Pnei Yeshua explains that in detail. But in Kedushin, it's in Kedushin, the Pnei Yeshua. Al Kaponim, the main thing for us to know is that the 600,000 letters of the Torah correspond to the 600,000 souls of Am Yisrael. Bereshis, the word Bereshis starts off, it's the Roshi Tevis, Yesh Shishim Riboy Oisios Torah. There are 600,000 letters in the Torah. Rabbi Yankov Abu Chatzera has a sefer, I forgot the name, it's a long time since I've seen it, but he has like about a couple of hundred Roshi Tevis of the word Bereshis itself. And one of them is it has 600,000 neshamos and whatnot. B'kitza, every soul of a Yid has a portion in the Torah. Every single Yid. Now, why would that be? Because all the neshamas come from Malchus, right? We just said that. All the neshamas come from Malchus. And Malchus is called Torah Shebal Peh. Tikkun Zoya, you have it in the city, the Posach Eliyahu, right? Malchus Peh, Torah Shebal Peh Krinelo. So that the Peh, the mouth of the person, really represents the Torah Shebal Peh, the hidden part. Why is that? because there's more than 600,000 Yidden. There's more than 600,000 Neshamos, but every letter of the Torah could be split into several different ideas, combinations. We'll take the letter Aleph as an example. Aleph, how do you write it?
2 Yud and a Vav.
You take a Yud on top, a Yud on the bottom, and a diagonal Vav in the middle, right? Lamed. Lamed is like a Chof with a Vav on top. Mem is like a Chof, but with a Vav as a leg, and so on. So all the letters have different parts to them. The Hey, right, is one leg, 2 legs, the third leg, Ches is that way, so on. So all the letters are really different parts, and all the neshamas are different parts of the different letters of the Torah. The Rebbe explains there that when a person learns Torah, and he learns the Shema, he's learning for the sake of Hashem, not for him to be a Rosh Yeshiva or a great rabbi or a very learned person, but he's learning to be able to understand and come close to Hashem. If he does that, then he is Moaharn. He's arousing the power of the letter that his neshama is rooted in. So let's say we come from the letter Tes. Tes, leg, bottom leg, so on and so forth, right? Come from the letter Tes, which stands for Toiv, for good. And I learn Torah, and I bring a light. I'm learning Lishma. Torah is light. Kiner mitzvah v'Torah or. So I bring light into the letter that my neshama corresponds to. Okay? Understood? Right? What happens if I bring light to one area? It lights up an entire area. Right? So that if I electrify one end of a wire, the other end also becomes electrified. So I am giving power to the other parts of that letter that correspond to my neshama. So all I have to do is sit and learn the Shema. Is it that difficult? Yes. But can I do that? Can I learn? If I learn Torah, I am illuminating my letter, and that letter is now illuminating the other souls that are attached to that letter. And since my letter is not really a letter by itself, there's only one letter, Hey, in the whole Torah, Pashas Ha'azinu, that stands by itself. Otherwise, every other letter is part of a word. So if I bring light to my word, to my letter, I'm bringing light to the letter that's adjacent to my letter. Take the word Tov. I'm bringing it to the Vav, I'm bringing it to the Beis, and all the letters that come after it. So that every Jew has Malchus. I have to Moaharn, arouse my Malchus that I have in my power, right? And I have to illuminate it. How do I illuminate it? By learning Torah. Ki Chaim heim l'moitzo ehem, the Rebbe brings it here in the part. L'chol b'soroi mapeh. Right? Chaim heim l'moitzo ehem, the Gemara in Eruvin says, l'moitzi ehem, not just l'moitzo ehem, those who find it, ela l'moitzi ehem. You have to articulate and pronounce those words. You pronounce the words with emunah in Hashem. You believe in Hashem that it's His Torah. You believe in Hashem that He gave the Torah to me, because I'm part of Malchus, which is Torah Shabbat Peh. I am part of that great binyan that Hashem built into the world. I have such power that I can influence people who may not be next to me. They may be in Argentina, in Australia, in Alaska, somewhere in Europe, maybe on the Russian-Ukrainian border for all I know, right? But I could bring light to them just by studying Torah, by learning and davening and doing what it is that I can. This is, do you understand the power that lies in the Jewish soul? You know how you could influence the world? You realize that this is what the Rebbe is telling us here, that we have the power to do that. We learn that from the Megillah. We'll come back to it later. But the Megillah, right, at the end, the Jews had a nisoyon, and they stuck it out, right? Mordechai didn't bow down to Haman. No avodah zarah for me. I'm not going to serve avodah zarah. I'm not bowing down, right? You come to me, come to Mordechai. He's the tzaddik yesod olam, but you come to Mordechai, you attach yourself to the tzaddik, you attach yourself to the teachings of the tzaddik, you study, and what happens is that at the end, Ra, the evil, has to fall before Mordechai. Haman had to fall before Mordechai. Paro had to fall before Moshe Rabbeinu. Achov, in last week's Haftarah, had to fall before Eliyahu Hanavi. They had to, because the power of the Malchus came out, and it was revealed that everything is through the Koyach HaTorah. So the end of the Megillah says, "V'rabim me'amei ha'aretz misyahadim." Many of the people turned to Judaism. Why? Because the power of the tzaddik came out, the power of the Torah HaKdosha revealed in the world, and this turned even the Goyim to become Yidden, right? And this can happen, which is why you have Gerim, right? Where would a Ger, a Goy who was grown up, let's say, in Wichita, Kansas, or one of those other bastions of Judaism, maybe in the middle of Nebraska or whatever, where would they come to become a Yid? What would motivate them to become a Jew, right? And the answer is the Koyach HaTorah that I learned is Ma'orer, the Koyach of the Neshama, wherever it may be from, even if a Ger, right, they come mitachas kanfei hashchina, right? They're also somehow, somewhere, that Neshama, those Neshamas were at Sinai. Those Neshamas received the Torah. The Chofetz Chaim says in Moaharn thing, he says, at Har Sinai, not every Jew really accepted the Torah. It's a chiddush of Godel. Not every Jew at Sinai accepted the Torah. Those are the Mishumodim that came out during the year, during the lifetimes, right? You had, especially in the time of the, what they call medieval times or whatever, in Europe during the Crusades and all that, when the church was forcing people to become, there were a lot of Mishumodim, right? Torquemada with all the inquisitions and all that. There were very few Jews who were very, very influential to Rahman al-Litzlan, to the church. They were from those neshamas at Sinai that did not want the Torah. Where did the Gerim come from? He says there were, Hashem offered the Torah to every nation. Everyone refused. The Gemara and Avodah Zarah, right? They refused the Torah, except that there were a few Goyim that wanted the Torah, and those where the neshamas of the Gerim came from. It's Moridik. It's a Gevaldik Chiddush from the Chofetz Chaim. I don't remember which sefer, right? I can blame it on COVID. I had it. It affected my memory. I don't know if it's true or not, but anyway, I could blame it on that. But Bekitza, it's in the Chofetz Chaim. I saw it. I know it's there, right? Because I was blown out of my mind when I first saw that. But Bekitza, the Rebbe is saying the Koyach HaTorah is what could bring people to come recognize Hashem. Even if you have no contact with them, you have no idea. We have a friend called Guillermo Belenson. You know Guillermo, right? He lives in La Plata, Argentina, right? 1984. No Yiddishkeit, nothing, mamish nothing. He spent time in the rainforests in Venezuela, and I mean, he has a history. I'm not going to go into it, but he wasn't, you know, he didn't grow up in Williamsburg, let's put it like that, or in Muncie, right? He was in Paris visiting. He walked into a Jewish bookstore for whatever reason. He was looking for a sefer. We have a sefer from the Rebbe, Meshivas Nefesh, Restore My Soul, right? He found that in French, which we had published in French. He found that. And it lit a fire in him. I mean, he was Jewish, but I knew his parents. I met his parents afterwards. But it lit a fire in him. He lives now alone, not in the Jewish community. He lives in La Plata. He's lived there all his life. But he's translated every sefer that we have in English, he's translated into Spanish, right? It's married. Every sefer we have in English, you'll find it in Spanish, right? Basically, the guy is a powerhouse. He's a one-man army. He's taken over the entire South American continent. But where did he come from, right? He came from the Rebbe's koyach of Torah. When the Torah was there, and it spoke to his neshama, and that's what happens. So it's incumbent upon us to learn Torah. Now, it's not going to happen all at once. Did you ever notice that every week we read a different parsha in the Torah? Right? Bereshis, Noach, Lech Lecha, Mishpatim, Tetzaveh, Vayakel. We're up to Likutey this coming. Now we're up to Vayakel this week. Right? But every parsha also, not that the Torah itself is divided, but each parsha is divided into 7 different parts. One for each day of the week. Rabbi Menachem explains that whatever is there in Rishon of that week is applicable to me on the Sunday of that week. Whatever is found in Sheni is applicable to me for Monday of that week. Which is why we have to learn the parsha of every week with the Rashi, so we should understand it. But we learn it, so the parsha is broken down. And even in Sheni, right, there's different psukim. It's not just one pasuk Sheni, it's broken down into different psukim. And not only that, the psukim are broken down to different words. And every word is broken down to different letters. So that each day I have an opportunity to learn the letters of that day, which will help me shine my neshama into the koyach HaTorah, so that I could arouse and bring light into each day. Isn't that fantastic? Well, I ask you, isn't that fantastic? You realize the koyach you have? But then the Rebbe says, so how come we're not all there? The Torah, the power of Torah is so great. Right? Torah, when the sun comes up in the morning, right, the whole earth is lit. Right? The Torah is far greater. It's Gemara in Eruvin. The Gemara says that how big is the Torah? Brings a pasuk from Yecheskel. The Torah was folded. I saw a Megillah. It was folded over this way, that way. When you unfold it, it comes out. The earth, right, is only 1/3,200th of the Torah. It's a Gemara Megillah. So if the sun, which is a small light compared to the Torah, could light the entire earth, why doesn't the entire earth light from the Torah? Right? Because the Gemara says, right, over Avera V'Shanaba Nasa Lo Keheter. If a person commits a sin, it's bad enough. It means that moment Hashem did not light to him. Worse, if he repeats that sin, if he does it again, so then it becomes as if it's allowed, right? I got used to doing it, so I do it, right? And I do it again and again and again and again. That is called a hastorah. First time that a person does a sin, it's called a hastorah. Hashem is hidden from me. That's why I did the Avera. When I do the Avera a second time, then it's called hastorah shebesoich hastorah. The first hastorah means that Hashem is hidden from me. I can't. Hastarto ponecha or yisi nevo, right? You say it every day in davening. Hastarto ponecha, Hashem hid his face, right? But when you do it the second time, then you're in a hastorah shebetoich hastorah. It's a famous song that's going around these days. Anyone know the song, right? Va'afilu behastorah shebetoich hastorah. It comes from here, from the Likutey Moaharn, right? But I'm so far from Hashem that I don't even realize that Hashem is hidden from me, right? So you can speak to anyone you want, stop anyone in the street, speak to him about Hashem. God. Is there a God? Yeah, of course. What does it mean to the person? Absolutely nothing. Because it's Hastorah Sheb'tzorech Hastorah, right? How do you get out of that Hastorah Sheb'tzorech Hastorah? When you learn Torah, you're bringing light and you're bringing ha'orah, an illumination to the koyach HaTorah to shine in the world, right? A few years ago, there was an article in the papers, the South Koreans. You heard of them? It's a country there at the eastern part of Asia, right? Small place that's always under threat from North Korea. But the South Koreans decided to buy Talmud. Remember the story? Right? I'm not making it up. Right? They're going to buy Talmud. Why? Because the Jews are so smart, and it must be because they study Talmud. That's what they said. So they recognized it. They realized it. Right? I ask you, are we that smart? Right? Go to universities and look at the Jewish teachers. Are they that smart? No. Right? Go to look at the Jewish kids on campus. Hashem should spare us all. The way they are today, they have no upbringing, no idea. The assimilation is just flooding the world and whatnot. Right? The koyach HaTorah that's in us, all those neshamas are lower than us because we are somehow connected to the Torah. If we're connected to the Torah, then we have to study Torah to the extent that it's going to bring illumination even out there to those neshamas. And we have that power. We have that koyach. If just we would take upon ourselves every day to study a certain amount of Torah, right? If it's a half hour, if it's an hour, if it's 2 hours, right? There's an interesting shach in the Mishnah Berurah brings, the Chaim brings, but the shach in Yeridea is talking about learning. What is the priorities of learning, right? The Shulchan Aruch talks about it, and the shach answers. The shach says that you should know those balabatim that only have 3 or 4 hours a day to learn. This is what the Shach writes, right? This is 400 years ago, right? Those balabatim that only have 3 or 4 hours a day to learn are not fulfilling the learning if they learn only Gemara. They have to learn Poskim. You have to learn Shulchan Aruch. You have to know what the halacha is.
So that's why you have Chokah Yisrael in Islam.
Huh?
That's why you have Chokah Yisrael.
That's one of the reasons the
Chokah
Chokah Yisrael put out. But he has everything in there. But the Shach is telling us those balabatim in his time that have only 3 or 4 hours a day to learn, right? Let's go out and ask the average guy how much time he spends a day learning, right? Let's find out how much really learning goes on. So we all have that power, that koyach HaTorah, to be able to spread Torah, not only to myself, that I should learn and I should understand and I should know the halacha. The main learning is halacha. I have to know what to do. Shabbos, right? Anyone here have grandchildren? I'm not going to talk about your children, young children. You have whatever the case might be, right? What do you do on Shabbos if the kid has a rash? Right? What do you do? How do you help the kid and not be Mechala Shabbos by smearing Vaseline or whatever it may be on him? How do you do? You have to know the halacha, right? The toys that we give to the children to play with. Some of them are beautiful. Some of them are muktzah, right? Do we know the halachas? Are we well versed? There's a guy, a beautiful sefer, Shmir Shabbos Kilchoso. He explains all this beautifully, very, very nicely. But al kaponim, the main thing is there's a hastorah, Hashem is hidden, and we have to reveal the hastorah. Okay? So now we'll come to the Inyan of Purim, the next page, right? V'zeh Perish, it's the beginning of the paragraph, but we'll preface it with the words. We're almost coming up to Purim. Purim is a yontif where it's called, we read a book called Megillas Esther. You ever notice that? Right? Megillas Esther. Megillah is from the root word megalot, to reveal. Esther is from the root word lahastir, the concealment, right? The hastorah shebetoich hastorah, right? Esther, Megillas Esther, is meant to reveal Hashem. Now, if you take a quick look at the Megillah, or even you look in Be'iyun, right? You're not going to find Hashem's name in the Megillah. There's a couple of places where it comes Roshi Tevis, Sofri Tevis, but you're not going to find Hashem's name in the Megillah. So how could it reveal Hashem? Megillas Esther, what's it revealing? And you read the story, well, it's a natural story, right? The original villainess, right, Vashti, she did things wrong, whatever, she was beheaded, okay, whatever she was going. And then along came Achashverosh wanted a wife. So he chose any woman, didn't matter, married, unmarried, didn't make a difference. He took anyone. The funny part is the Medrash says that Esther was 74 years old when he took her, right? You would think,
green.
Huh?
And green. The
And green, yeah. But you would think that he would look for a 20-year-old, right? Something like that. Here he's looking for a 74-year-old hag, right? What's he doing here? Well, what's But okay, he takes. She found Chaim. And then there's a story. Mordechai hears these two guys, Biggs and Viserys, talking whatever they're talking, right? They didn't know that he understood their language, right? And then along comes Haman. And he says, wipe out the Jews, right? And Mordechai found Chaim in the eyes of Achashverosh, and Achashverosh takes, what happened to Mordechai? Nothing. No, that's not fair, right? We got to reward him somehow. Ride him on a horse in front of the whole town, right? This is the cover that a guy gets for saving the king's life. Ride on anyone here want to go to a zoo and you can ride on the donkey? What do they have? The little.
Should have rolled out a check.
Should have rolled out a check, right? But that's not what happened. He put him on top of a horse with royal garments and whatnot, right? So it looks natural, the story of the Megillah, right? Then Esther and Naaman, and then all of a sudden everyone's becoming Jewish, right? Well, how did that happen? What's the big deal, right? So he rode on a horse, so now everyone's becoming Jewish and whatnot, right? What's happening is that the Koyach HaTorah, that which was hidden, which is the Hashgochas Hashem Yisborach, that Hashem was watching over the Jewish nation as he does today, even today, or especially today, right? Hashem was watching over, right? And that's what brought about the miracle of Purim. So let's learn now this paragraph here. Is that Perish? ובכל ויום מרדכי מסלך לפני חצה בית הנשים לדעת שלום אסתר ומו יהיה סבו. Esther was taken to the king's palace. That she was taken there, Rashi brings there in the Megillah, right? Mordechai was one of two tzaddikim that had something happen. Something happened here. Something is happening here, and they took the remez, they took the hint that there's a reason for this, and I've got to look for the hashgacha. That's right. The first one was David HaMelech, right? If you remember the story in Tanakh, David HaMelech came before Shaul, I'm going to beat Goliath, right? He was a young man at 28 years old, never experienced in war, right? I'm going to go out against Goliath, who was an experienced warrior, and he was a giant, right? And he was dressed in completely copper armaments from top to bottom. His head, his forehead, his whole body, everything was covered. David HaMelech is going to go out and fight him. How do you know you could? Where do you come to this, right? He said, because I was a shepherd, right? A shepherd, watching sheep. The lion came, and the bear came, and I didn't stop. I grabbed them by its hair, right, and I slew them. And David HaMelech took a remiss that something's going to happen one day when I'm going to be able to use that koyach. And he saw it with Goliath, and he went out and he defeated Goliath, right? And then came Mordechai. He says, there has to be a reason why this tzaddikus Esther was taken to the house of Achashverosh, who was a manuvel, a meshukutz, and a noyef. Anything that you could find wrong with humanity was in Achashverosh, right? The Gemara says in Megillah, why was he called Achashverosh? Achi v'rosh, right? Vai v'rosh, everything that happened, anything with him, he was a pain in the head. In other places too, right? So Achashverosh was that terrible a person, right? But he was king. Amoylech, Rashi says, Amoylech me'atzmo. The Gemara. He took the kingdom, he usurped the kingdom for himself, from somebody else. He wasn't royal in the Melucha. He was a stable guy, I think, if I remember correctly. Al Kaponim, Esther was taken there. So every day, Mordechai went before the Chatzah Beis Hanoshim. The guy Hege Swiss Hanoshim, he was the one who would guard the women. So he would stand there. Mordechai would go out and try and find out what's happening with Esther. There's a reason why she was taken here, right? So Mordechai, the Rebbe says, Zeh bechinas hamalchus kanal. Mordechai, it says there in Sif Beis, he represents Malchus, because he's called Mor Deroyer, right? The Gemara in Chulin says, Mordechai min ha-Torah minayin. How do we know Mordechai is written in the Torah? Right, everything is in the Torah. B'shagom hubosa. Shagom is he'll live 120 years. Shagom, b'shagom is 345, the same gematria as Moshe. How do you know Mordechai from the Torah? Because the pasuk says, "Kach l'chol b'somim roish, mor deroyer." Right, mor deroyer. The Targum says more dachya. Right, pure spices, which is the words Mordechai. So Mordechai is alluded to in beautiful smelling spice. Right? Esther, how do you know her from the Torah? Because the pasuk says, "V'yanochi hastir astir ponai." She's alluded to in the Hastorah. Right? Haman min ha-Torah minayin. How do you know Haman is alluded to in the Torah? Because the pasuk says, "Hamin ha'etz asher tzivisicha lo lechol." From the Eitz Hadas, from what is right and what is wrong, right? That's Haman, right? We don't know what's right and what's wrong. Amalek is always there. Amalek is the gematria of Suffolk, doubt, right? What's the right thing for me to do? Should I get out of bed today or should I stay in bed? What should I do today, right? This is Suffolk. And I get out of bed, what do I do now? And I start going out and what do I do now? What do I do now? Every minute is just another suffix, right? I know I have to do this. I'm going to try and do this. Is this going to work out? What can I do to? So the suffix, the power, that comes from the Eitz Hadas. So they're all in the Torah, right? And Mordechai went before the Chatzah Beis Hanoshim. What's Chatzah Beis Hanoshim? Chatzar means the courtyard. It's outside, right? And the bias is the concealed. There's a revealed courtyard, and there's the concealed, which is the house, right? He went before Chatzar Beis Hanoshim, Chatzar bias. He went looking for the revealed, he went looking for the concealed. There's something here that's happening, I gotta find it, right? Then he said Chatzar Beis Hanoshim. Now Rashi in Parshas Vayishlach, right? The Parsha says that Al Kain La Yuchlu B'nei Yisrael is Gid Hanosha. The Jews will not eat the sciatica nerve, right? They won't eat the sciatica nerve, right? Gid Hanosha. What is the word Hanosha? Where does the word come from? Rashi brings 3 roots for the word, which the Rebbe speaks over here. Rashi says there, Milosh Shenoshu v'kovtzu mimkoymer shaloidim. They jumped away. The word noshim alludes to those who jumped away from Hashem. They're the weaker people, the weaker gender, right? So they're weak people who fall away from Hashem. They're the ones who fall away completely. You just jumped away. There's no Hashem, chas v'sholom. Shenisrachu me Hashem. Then there are other type of people. Yesh shekvar hoyu k'tzatz eitzel Hashem yisborach, avol shekvar shochu oiso yisborach. There are some who were close. They were religious at some time, or they were interested in religion, but they forgot it. They're overwhelmed by what goes on in this world, right? Shekvar shochu was Hashem yisborach. That's the word of Noshim. There's another pshat, shekvar shochu es Hashem yisborach. Geish shegam ata zoichem es Hashem yisborach, asher nosh so gvurosim. But there are those who still remember this Hashem, and they'd like to serve Hashem, but they don't have the koyach to put that effort into davening, into learning, into doing the mitzvahs the way they're supposed to. This is Chatzar Beis Hanoshim, right? There's a place where people fall away from Hashem. They fall away from a revelation. They saw something and they forgot. Well, Lahavdil Alfi Alofim, there was a fella, if anyone heard his name, Winston Churchill, right? Did you ever hear of him? Right? Brilliant guy, whatever. He has a saying, everyone in the world stumbles across the truth. Right? 98% pick themselves up and keep on walking. Right? It's Moaharn, right? People, they recognize what's right, but it doesn't matter to them. They just keep on going in life. That's shenovshu, v'kovshu, Hashem, or those who nashani, they forgot completely, or those who want, but they just don't feel they have the koyach for it. Yeshig amat zorchem b'shvuz that are called noshim. Right? Vashem Yisborach nista mehem hastorah. Or Mordechai, who is the Malchus, right? Mori dachia, but he's alluded to from the words mor deror. Mor is like a master, right? A leader, a master. Mar, right? Mar. It's throughout the Gemara. Mar, Mar, right? Mor deror means he's a free man. He's a free master. His power of rule does not have anything to do with himself, right? If you are a person that you have a ruling power, but you use it only for the others who are under you, you're learning Torah, you're doing mitzvahs. If you have that power, you're more deror, you're not bound to become, I have to be this kind of politician, I have to be this, I have to be that, right? I'm a free agent. I can do whatever I want. How to take Putin, he does whatever he wants, right? He doesn't care. But Metzias is a person who's not bound. I have to do this. Well, what are the people going to say? And, how's it going to look? And they don't have that. They're free. Free people means they can do what they want, serving Hashem, right? When they have Mordechai, then he's the one who's able to look into the Chatzar Beis Hanoshim. He's able to look into the concealed or revealed concepts, and he's able to take all those people who are far. How? Because he teaches Torah, he does mitzvahs. Right? The Gemara at the end of Megillah, it says, Mordechai, right? Ki Mordechai HaYehudi, Mishnah LeMelech Achashverosh, Godol HaYehudim, V'rotzui L'roi V'echov. Most of his brothers accepted him. So the Gemara asks, what happened to the rest? Right? Roi V'echov, most of his brothers, what happened? He says there are people from Sanhedrin who walked away from Mordechai because he was busy with governmental affairs. He wasn't learning like he should have. That's what the Gemara says. Rashi brings it in the Megillah. Rotzli l'roi v'echad. But Mordechai was busy teaching the governments, teaching people how to be more deror, how to be a free agent, so that I could teach people Torah. I could do what I don't have to be bound. I don't have to learn this stuff. I don't have to learn this Gemara. I don't have to learn this Seder in yeshiva. I can sit and learn. I can sit and learn, and I can accomplish. Right? I find it really amazing. Just as an afterthought, you don't have to quote me on this. You can if you want, but you don't have to. But there are guys who are like 25 years old, and they've been sitting in yeshiva learning Gemara since they were 10. Right? Only a few of them have ever finished more than 10 Masechtas. Right? What happened to the rest of Shas? You're learning 15 years Gemara. What happened to the rest of Shas? It doesn't count. Right? So on. You have to be more deror. You have to be able to, no, I have to learn, this is the way we do it, this is the way we do it, this is the way we do it, and they never end up learning Shas. Guys could be 35, 40. I was in the mikveh once. I heard a guy saying, I knew the guy, and he's saying, I'm 38 years old. I says, where am I? What am I done? I'm sitting in yeshiva the whole time. What else? I have, maybe I could tell it. I was in a Shabbaton in Beit Shemesh once, right? And it was two other guys I was speaking with. One was a friend, I had known him. One was a new guy, he introduced me. He said, I give a class, we have a book called Anatomy of the Soul, right? He says, I want you to know I give a class in Anatomy of the Soul every week. It's an amazing book, whatever. Okay, whatever. He says, you must have been gewaldig, learning in yeshiva. So I told him, I have to tell you, I only learned 1 year in yeshiva after high school. I went to Eretz Yisrael. I learned there for a year. And then I went home. And I went out to work, right? I had to get married, right? My mother was almona. When my father passed away, I was 7. So my mother was a widow. She had no money, right? She was a teacher in school, Sachakol, right? Whatever, what could she have, right? And my shver had even less money than that. So this is how I had to go out and work. I had to support the family, right? So the guy who taught the anatomy says to me, gewaldig, amazing. What would have happened to you if you would have sat in yeshiva and learned? I said, I would have been like the rest of the guys. Then, Baruch Hashem, I had my own schedules. I did my own thing. And Hoidul Hashem, whatever it is, and that's how we have Breslov research today. But whatever the case is, Mordechai went out and he taught. He looked into those who are far and distant from Hashem. He says, why did he go out? L'das Shloim Esther. Das is the Das Torah. Das means I know what Torah is all about. I've learned Shulchan Aruch.
And the Sanhedrin didn't.
I know Shulchan Aruch, huh?
Someone, the Sanhedrin were Polish from him.
From him, I just
know.
said that
and
before.
they didn't know.
Huh?
So they didn't know.
They weren't Mordechai. Right? The Arizal says Mordechai came from one of the highest levels of heaven. Mamish from there, it's called Yisoy Da'aba, whatever it is, whatever that means to us. But Mordechai was from the highest levels in a certain way. He was from Chochmah, and Moshe Rabbeinu was only from Bina.
And they couldn't handle it.
Right? Mordechai was much higher. But whatever the case is, not that Moshe Rabbeinu was less than Mordechai, but his root was less than, and it's a whole deal. The Kitzur, Das means the Das of Hashem. That we know Hashem, we can recognize Hashem. You have to bring knowledge of Hashem to the world. That someone should say, yes, there is a God. Right? The story is told of the Barditchev Rav. He got introduced to Chassidus and he traveled to Rabbi Yitzchak Baditch. He traveled to the Maggid of Mizrich to learn Hasidus. He was there. He stayed there for a year. Came back to his family who were misnagdim. They laughed at him. So what'd you learn by the Maggid for a year? I learned that there's a God. Right? They laughed at him. What do you know? They called over the maid in the house. It was a young girl who used to work out in the house. He says, is there a God? She said, of course. Right? So they looked at him. No, she did say, she didn't go to the Maggid. You learned there for a year. This is what you learned. He says, yeah, there's a difference between us. She is saying it. I know it. It's in here. I know that there is Hashem. I know. Right? It's an absolute revelation of Hashem. That's what Megillas Esther has come to teach us. Megillas Esther has come to teach us that there's Hashgacha of Hashem, right? And there's always a guy like Haman. Take a look at Iran today. You ever hear of them? The Iranians, cute people, right? Right? And now they're demanding to have nuclear talks. Right? Biden insists on nuclear talks. Obama started it, Yimach Shemam, right? Mm-hmm. Along comes Biden, now the Iranians are demanding more. They're demanding more. What are they? Nothing. They have no food. They have nothing. They're starving over there. They have no what, and they're demanding. What's going on? The Yonasan ben Uziel in Parshas Lech Lecha, where it talks about the Machzeh of Avram. Avram Avinu had this vision. Right, Bris Bein Absarim, right? So it talks there, B'heinei ema chashecha gedoyle nefeles olav. There was darkness and fear and falling upon him. Yonasan ben Uziel says this alludes to the four Malchus. The Medrash and Rabbi says it also, but Yonasan ben Uziel says, but that means at the end of time, which is now, right? Malchus Poras, the Iranians, will rise up and cause problems to Am Yisrael. Take a look. It's in Parshas Lech Lecha. This is the Torah is true, right? The point is, das is if I recognize, das if I learn Torah, das if I come to understanding that there's halacha, this is my halacha, and I understand it. Now I go further to the next halacha, right? If I do that, then I know I am exercising my malchus the right way, and I have the power to bring Klal Yisrael back to Hashem. That is the lesson of Purim. I don't know what time it is. Maybe I overstayed my welcome. It's possible. Very probable. Right?
Not a chance. Not a chance.
Not a chance. Yes, the people will fall asleep. Right? Right? What you have is to understand the Megillas Esther. You're not going to find Hashem there. You're not going to look and see, oh, look, there's Hashem there. Right? And the Gemara at the end of Tainus says, Zeh Hashem kivinu loy. The tzaddikim are going to make a dance around the Shekhinah, and they're going to say, this is the Hashem that I was looking for my whole life. Zeh Hashem. This is the Hashem. They will see it then. But until then, it's not happening. Right? We have to look for Hashem. We have to search for Hashem. We have to find. And how does it come to us? Through the koyach of the tzaddik. The tzaddik teaches us that there is a Ribbon Shalom. We have to learn the tzaddik svarim. And Be'ez Hashem will be zocher to have the most freilich Purim ever, right, with Bias HaMashiach and the Gula Shlema, B'neiru B'yameinu, Amen.
I have a couple of questions.
I'm sure.